So welcome to our last panel. Unfortunately, it's coming to an end. We've had some excellent papers and discussion over the last day and a half. Our first speaker this morning is Sonja Luehrmann. She's an associate professor of anthropology at Simon Fraser University in Vancouver, Canada. Her research focuses on religion and lived ideology in Soviet and post-Soviet Russia, and in her current ethnographic research, she focuses on anti-abortion activism in the post-Soviet Russian Orthodox Church. Professor Luehrmann is author of Secularism, Soviet Style, Teaching Atheism and Religion in a Volga Republic, and Religion in Secular Archives, Soviet Atheism and Historical Knowledge, both on Soviet atheism and its effects on post-Soviet religion and historical memory. This morning she's going to speak to us with a paper entitled Blending In, Ambient Faith, Pronatalism, and the Question of a State Church in Contemporary Russia. So please join me in welcoming Sonja.
When you talk to people outside the church, it seems that it has a lot of power. When you talk to people inside, it seems that it has no power at all. That is how a young sociologist in Moscow answered my question about the position of the Russian Orthodox Church in Russia in 2014. This paper seeks to unpack the paradox behind this statement, the paradox that has close relationship to issues of state sanctity and legitimacy that we are looking at in this panel, in this workshop. So I'm trying to unravel the paradox between the widespread perception of a shift to sacred politics or theocracy in contemporary Russia versus the laborious and often frustrating experiences of clergy and lay people who seek to create a version of an Orthodox Christian public. One of the key points of contention I will show is what channels the Church should and can use to build and exert its influence in society. On the one hand, a model of social service provision following the example of secular NGOs, or on the other, a ritual model drawing on resources specific to Orthodox techniques of the self. Despite the very real obstacles encountered by activists on either path, the power of the Church as an institution in today's Russia lies in its uniquely ambient status, which allows it to combine both strategies in a way that is not always possible for other denominations, but that requires the Church to embrace indeterminacy and sometimes remarkable ideological openness and flexibility in its political persona. I will start with two examples from my field research on the Church's involvements in the politics of reproduction and pronatalism. In June 2014, I visited St. Petersburg to look at the emerging infrastructure for supporting families and children in the Russian Orthodox Church. Father Anatoly, a pseudonym that I'm using, who was newly appointed head of the Diocesan Commission for the Family and Motherhood, talked to me at length about his project of supporting couples in order to help build healthy families. Adopting a Polish model of support groups for couples, he organized seminars and groups in various parishes of the diocese. To support these activities, he was drawing on the resources of his own congregation and also setting up grants-funded partnerships. In Tula, a smaller Russian city just south of Moscow, Father Sergei, the rector of the Church of the Birth of the Theotokos, told me about a different kind of programming in his church. It had been designated a family church by the bishop, meaning that it had a number of icons and services connected to family life. These included the icon of the Holy Innocent Infants of Bethlehem, in front of which there were weekly prayer services for women who were doing penance for abortion, and also an icon of the Roman martyr Varus, in front of which people offer prayers for those who died by suicide and cannot be commemorated in standard memorial services. The congregation also operated a center of aid for families, which provided used clothing and furniture. Donations from the prayer services and in-kind offerings from parishioners fueled the charitable outreach. Any good action helps, said Father Sergei, discussing how couples expiated past reproductive decisions through donations. These two approaches to programming, a program of lectures and classes in St. Petersburg and an icon program in Tula, reflect two different ways in which Russian Orthodoxy is ambient in today's Russia. A subtle part of the intimacy of individual lives, but also an institution that shapes possibilities of public participation for members and non-members alike. In his work on British Anglicanism, Matthew Engelke situates what he terms ambient faith as counterpoint to the debate about public and private religion in the contemporary world. When religious practices and traditions are so much a part of the cultural context that they fade into the background like ambient music, Engelke explains, they both confuse and refuse boundaries between public and private spheres. They are public by virtue of their pervasiveness, but also, in Engelke's words, seep out of various private and otherwise non-public spaces and fill the air. Researching anti-abortion and pronatalist activism in the Russian Orthodox Church, I often found that its cultural power lay in its capacity to both fade into the background as taken for granted religious option and cross boundaries between private hopes and memories and public commitments. In this paper, I used the notion of ambient faith to contest another image of the Russian Orthodox Church that is gaining ground in the media and among people who are more remote from it, the idea of a state church that has an increasing hold over Russia's public sphere. In the case of Russia, the idea of a state church reflects the strategy of rapprochement of religious elites with the ruling apparatus of the Russian state, in the words of the Russian sociologist Karpov, that has been noted by observers since the period of Dmitry Medvedev's presidency between 2004 and 2008. But it neither captures the limits of the church's political persona, nor the ways in which it achieves legitimacy in the eyes of its adherents. As a private issue that is increasingly in the public eye in a context of demographic anxiety, family and reproductive decisions are prime areas to explore how the church both feeds upon ambient cultural assumptions and must limit its ambitions to channel and direct them. So a little bit more about this notion of ambience and how it relates to current demographic anxieties in Russia. The notion of ambience implies something that is present and shapes one's experience of a social space without necessarily being foregrounded or articulated. In Engelke's work, that is the angel artwork in a shopping mall that subtly evokes a more than consumerist vision of Christmas without being overtly marked as Christian. And this also has parallelized in work on normalized Catholicism in French public art that Elaine Oliphant has done. In purportedly atheist socialist countries, the ability of majority religions to blend into national heritage can also be seen as examples of ambient faith in largely secular contexts,